So what you've got Superfly. Superfly, but you got Superfly the movie combines with Superfly the soundtrack.
Zaza.
And then all of a sudden, you've got how many records sold, bro?
Well, okay. Matter of fact, the soundtrack was one of the first soundtrack that I know of that had 2 singles, Freddy is Dead and Superfly, that sold 1 million copies respectively. Each one sold 1 million copies.
Affinity Xtra, be extra.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are personal and do not necessarily represent the views of Affinity Xtra.
Yeah. People, it's your boy here, Roger Moore here on Affinity Xtra. Here's about the gospel music of black origin, and we're not going to be super dry today. We're going to be super fly. You get me still? Yeah, you know. I wonder what I said that teethed it from super fly. Anyway, still, yeah. Now we're talking about a creative revolution in the 70s. Crazy before I was born. And this period here that we're talking about, these artists that we're coming out, is birthed out of, and this is why we push now about Black lives, about injustices. In time we shall reap. Now these guys were about to reap, and we're gonna be talking about some of the reaping that black creativity did, because people just got militant in the now ramp, yeah. And the way we're functioning right now here in Affinity Xtra, we now ramp. Yeah, I'm saying, you know how it goes anyway. So yeah, this Roger here, alongside the black music historian, but also we have to bring black history into context. So I would say that Kevin has got a vast knowledge in terms of cultural and black culture in the time zones that he has studied in, because culture and creativity, ultimately you would say that creativity is a reflection of culture. Yeah, you reflect your culture through your creativity. You can't hide it. Some people, you're not trying to suppress it.
Prince.
Okay. Woo.
Michael Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
Curtis Mayfield, who we're going to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Quincy Jones.
Mm-hmm.
Marvin Gaye.
Mm-hmm.
Sinatra.
Mm-hmm.
Elvis Presley.
Mm-hmm.
All of them did an interpretation of the culture in which Elvis Presley used to go into the church and watch our brothers and sisters worship, and got his flavor of stage presence and so forth. Yes, it's all an interpretation of their time and their moment when they were growing up.
Yeah.
You capture the scene, the feelings, the emotion of what was actually occurring at that time in their space, and in that moment, which in itself becomes history.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
No, 100%, 100%. No, 1000%, brother. So we're gonna be doing the first part on a revolution about a movie called Superfly, and the guy that was not behind him is the musically. But I wanted to really look at Superfly itself, the movie, because when you press play in the trailer, all of a sudden you just or you hear the instruments, and it is a clear indication. I watched a lot of like Chips. I don't know if you remember Chip.
Yes. Chips.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
The two police officers. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
And what I noticed, there's a lot of programs back in the in the 80s that had loads of funk and stuff going on in the background, and little chops and stuff go, and they're driving the car, and then all these, and these are birthed out of projects like Superfly. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
Because of musicality.
Yes.
Go.
Well, let us remind ourselves that one of the master at music production of film soundtracks was Quincy Jones. Quincy Jones was doing soundtracks prior to Superfly.
Okay.
Like Ironside. Yes, he was the composer of The Pawn and all these different soundtracks that came out of Hollywood. Quincy Jones was behind them as the score, the composer and the arranger and so forth. So they when you look at some of the Stanford was a Quincy Jones soundtrack. Yeah, the sound. You can hear it in the, you know, yeah. So yes, it was beginning to take center stage because of what had actually transpired. Hollywood just realized now that, hold on a minute, blacks can buy music and actually help the artists become bestsellers without technically crossing over. But they do cross over because you put in that movement is begin to sell.
And that's something. And this is a bit of, and I saw that, you know, growing up, there's a bit of white ignorance. Is that basically that we are not a market to service, and we seem to, and this is our problem with our black community, is that we don't realize we got power in ourselves. We have a power, and we see ourselves sometimes from the lens of, not everybody, but of a stereotypical systemic viewpoint from a white perspective. They see us as, okay, that's not a valuable element. They're not bringing value to this country. But the reality show is that our pound is vastly spent outside of our market. If you're gonna get a black footballer to buy a car, I'd say if he was on a 50k a week, yeah, he was a black footballer, and that sounds harsh. If it follows trends, will spend more on status symbols like Mercedes Benz and Porsches than a white footballer who will more likely spend it a different way, because we grew up and we were around poverty. We're very quick to show we're not in poverty. You know what I'm saying? So, but the thing is, we naturally spend. You know what I mean? These young boys that walk around £1,000 man bags, and they don't even earn £1,000 guaranteed a month, and they're not even in the job. You know what I mean? So these guys are walking. So for me now, it's a case of it's understanding the power of a pound. And I think this revolution that went on with the music industry that we've discussed many times, the Aretha Franklins as well, would have showed that black music has a part to play in the world. But the fusion, yes, as Kevin says, with Hollywood, but Hollywood weren't taking a risk with certain type of movies now, and you have these guys producing Superfly, which does have a white guy behind the project and backing it, investing into it, and you know, and these are the facts that I've, you know, Kevin made sure I know about this. The movie Superfly, and I get you guys going, why are you on about a movie today? But listen, it is 30 mil it made, and it only cost $500,000, but that $500,000 they struggled and strained to get there, and they had black doctors and dentists invested in it. The main executive producer, he invested into it. This white guy, I can't remember his name, but yeah, he invested into it. So the number of people who invested it into their own pocket. The actors and actresses lived not in comfort to deliver this Superfly film, you know what I'm saying, to be delivered to the market in 1972, and it grossed 30 million. Yeah, and it showed a fusion. But what's important part of this, you can't bops down the street as a black person like Superfly, you know what I mean, without the music, bro. You got to have the music with it. And you know, and I love artists that know where no wants to come from, you know what I mean, they're not too stush. So they approach this guy called Curtis Mayfield, yeah, Curtis Lee Mayfield, and listen, man, the soundtrack, man, I was playing it, and I just hear the strings go. I was like, yo, them string arrangements, I can't even play on the keyboard. They're that significant. But Kevin's gonna go into this, but we just want to really go back a little bit into Curtis Mayfield in his history as a child and whatsoever, and have a look at his environment before he got involved with these guys. And we're gonna go into the second part, which will expand more on his creative geniuses outside of this with the impressions and so on. So we're gonna get into that a bit later in the second part. But listen, Kevin, where did this child start from? What city was he born? Was he born in New York? Was he born in LA? Texas? Come on, man. Come on.
He was
Toronto.
He was born in the Windy City, which is known as Chicago. Chicago had one of the biggest at the time one of the biggest black community.
And it's the black community that got forced to the north.
Yes,
because of poverty.
Because their parents, their parents actually travelled to the north to find work.
And you know what's scary?
When
we was watching a Tatum guy, we just watching him, and he was saying about Jim Crow rules that the law was only in the South. What you have to realize, guys, it's just because that Jim Crow law was in the South doesn't mean as soon as you get to Chicago, life is easy for black people because they get paid 5 times more. But say, for example, the rent is 5 times more or 10 times more, relatively, financially, not under Jim Crow, they're better off. Or because of racism. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? They don't get the best jobs, don't get the best opportunities, you get dumped into the area, and then all of a sudden, we're not going to go into the crack epidemic, we're going to push crack into certain black areas, but we're not going to go and touch that still, just put it out there. But listen, it was not easy, so just because it's in big city Chicago, just do not think of Chicago Bulls and Michael Jordan. It's a total different thing.
It was a totally different thing during that time. There were a lot of projects where a lot of the music legends like Tom 84, who worked with Phil Collins on Horns, a black brother, and so on.
Just drop his name in,
Yes, I have to drop this name. I could drop a few. I could actually drop a few other people.
You just dropped a 3-pointer, really? Steph Curry, 3-pointer, just dropped on me, man. I was like, really?
I could drop. I could actually drop several other people into the mix. But let's just go back a bit. Curtis Mayfield was born in 1942. He would be about 80 years old. I don't know, the late Curtis Mayfield, but he died in his 60s, as far as I know. So I have to had another 20 years of my life to his, when I was growing up, this gentleman became a very prolific songwriter. My friend said that there's about 3,000 credits that is connected to Curtis Mayfield. By the time Curtis Mayfield did Superfly, he had 2 publishing companies and a record company. I repeat, he had 2 publishing companies and a record company.
Proper
business, and a proper studio, which was the former RCA studio, which he bought. With his earning, he bought it, bro. Bought it from RCA Records, major label.
What do you do with your money, musicians?
Yeah,
stop buying KFC.
Yes. And Mr. Curtis Mayfield wasn't a person. He was very conscious of black empowerment or economic independence. So he very much was, he visits the Library of Congress and so on to make sure he understand the power of copyrights. So to make sure that he had shares in, how would I put it? Shares or was able to get residual income from the things that he wrote. So when an artist recorded his music and it's released and radio plays it, he says, ching ching, come to Curtis Mayfield a certain percentage. So he was a prolific lyricist. As a matter of fact, he was, he could be regarded as one of the music architects of the Chicago soul and R&B sound.
So with sorry, I want to go a little bit back.
Go a little further, yes.
Go back a bit back in his life. I think again we're here on a station which celebrates gospel music, and we even pointed at the Prince being upbringing is in church and 100%. And sometimes you don't have to take it as auto, especially for the new R&B singers. It's not really a given nowadays.
No, it's not necessarily. No.
But back in these days, it was.
It was a given.
You know what I'm saying? And his mum taught him piano. You know what I mean?
That's correct.
He's got down here that he attended a school a wild community academy school before dropping out his second year. His mom taught him piano along with his grandma, so he had two generations of piano players there. So the musicality was in him, and he encouraged him to enjoy gospel music. You know what I mean?
Right,
and it's part of he went to his aunt's church where the Northern Jubilee gospel singers were. So this is a reality show, is that his mom might not be going to church, but he makes sure he goes to church with his auntie and says, listen, you all open the gospel stuff. And sometimes as parents, the most challenges for parents who are not church goers, I'm not saying you're forcing your children into religion, but sometimes I believe that the church should be the space that your character gets developed, your skill sets gets developed, and a lot of things. That's what happened in the UK as well, in the 80s and 90s and the 2000s, when a lot of the Caribbean community did their time in Sunday school, not knowing that the church has developed certain elements of the character that has prepared them to better business. And I find that a lot of the Sunday school kids that came through Sunday school have done well in their jobs, have been articulate, has been successful. A lot more higher ratio when the kids that weren't grow up in church. I'm not saying everyone's bad out there in the streets, but I feel that the moralistic, the vocal, the training that it has as people has done an amazing positive part. And you can see in Curtis Lee Mayfield that part of him had a creative strength, the improvisation and everything there of a piano player from church is amazing. But then obviously he's done his thing, and he was influenced by blues music and whatsoever, and blues singers and whatever. So you got that whole vibey thing about it. And this is where you got the R&B sound, the rhythm and blues sound. And the thing is, talk to me about blues. What? Because blues, I just think of the jing 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 ding.
It's
oh yeah.
Yes.
I saw my mama and she's getting down. The boy. I don't know. I just think of something like that.
The blues in Chicago was synonymous.
Is it?
Yeah,
because I thought it was more like a southern sound thing.
Yeah, it's a sudden.
But I suppose it comes with the migration.
Yeah, it has to do with the migration, because when you think about Muddy Waters and so on, they came out, and Wolf, they all came out from the south, and they migrated to the north, and they bring.
Yes, he said he's inspired by blues singer Muddy Waters.
Yeah, they brought their sound and their experience with them to the industrial north.
And blues is more. Would you say blues preceded jazz? Or was after jazz, or was almost
they're almost the same actually, because they go back. There's the early experience of the black sisters and brothers. They're expressing, because remember, most of that stuff come out of the plantations and so on, as they sing, the Negro spirituals and the instrument was their entertainment. It was their survival. Just like Bob Marley came from the ghetto. His instrument, that's how he expressed himself. That's why he became such a brilliant lyricist, because he can interpret the environment around him. And so Curtis Mayfield became a student of the situation, the environment, working in the inner city.
And also it's coming from the environment of basically growing up in the north.
That's right.
Where you got the beginnings of ghettos. You got a tough life.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? It's not easy on the streets. You know what I mean? For black people.
Yeah.
And I want to tell this more into Superfly.
Yeah.
So this is how he entices a very artist that has just produced a big hit. Is it moving on up?
Moving on up.
A big hit, and he gets a phone call. Sir, we're just doing a movie about a pimp, or not pimp, but a drug dealer. You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? Could you do the soundtrack for it? You know what I'm saying? Now, what you expect him to say is, I'm moving on up, man. I'm leaving you behind, mate. You know what I'm saying? But he came back down, bro.
Yes. The thing about Curtis, what Curtis was doing, he was in a sense capturing the time. Because the black pimps were a key part of the cultural
Makeup, yeah.
Makeup at the time. In the big cars, the furry coats, beautiful black sisters in their silk and all, big hairdo and the big fur hats and so on, mink, and it's pretty swag, sort of a black consciousness.
Yeah.
A liberation, black and I'm proud, sort of situation. And there was a lot of blacks that were economically inclined. They were black business. There were black air companies. There were black insurance companies. There were black banks. What people need to remember, they were black in several areas. There were mum and pop stores that were doing extraordinarily well. And also, before they arrived at Curtis Mayfield's door, Curtis Mayfield had his record label, Curtum. And matter of fact, Curtis, the first solo album he did, went gold. It was
Not
a
bad.
gold certified. Yes,
Not bad.
Not bad. So yes, Curtis was a kingpin already long before Superfly came to his desk.
But he come to his desk now, guys. Yeah, and this is what's crazy, and this is where we need to really work out our synergy when it comes to as creative people, and I think that as creative video people alongside with creative musicians have to realize that we could combine together and create masterpieces. You know what I'm saying? So what you've got Superfly, sorry, yes, Superfly, but you got Superfly the movie combines with Superfly the soundtrack,
Zaza.
and then all of a sudden you've got how many records sold, bro?
Well, okay. Matter of fact, the soundtrack was one of the first soundtrack that I know of that had two singles, Freddy's Dead and Superfly, that sold 1 million copies respectively. Each one sold 1 million copies.
That's not bad, man.
And then the album did several million itself. And also, let's get this right, the album was number one on the Billboard 200 album charts, which is the pop charts, the equivalent to pop charts to the UK official pop album charts. It was number one for 4 weeks. It was number one for actually 4 weeks, starting the 21st of October, 1972. Which would almost, when we reached October this year, it would be exactly 50 years that it peaked at that number. And it was number one for 4 solid weeks. So that means it became a crossover. That means white people were buying it as well.
Yeah,
Ooh.
Yeah, man.
There were
Yeah,
white
man.
people that was actually buying it. It was revolutionary because if you listen to Superfly and listen to the track progression, the sound progression, it had funk, it had strings, it was syncopated,
everything,
and brass,
man. Yeah,
the whole
lot, man.
actually it went to another musical level actually.
No, 100%.
Yes,
And
you agree with it,
I
yeah.
think, when you emphasize that we got white clientele, because the reality show is Hollywood wasn't investing into black directed and black films. You know what I'm saying? It was all, don't get me wrong, as Kevin said, Quincy Jones was already in that arena and whatsoever, but we weren't directing movies. We wasn't inspired by us or whatever. So yeah, they had poor versions of us. You had is it Lawrence? What's his name? Lawrence Olivier? Or what's that actor? Black actor, the first one. What's his name? Oh goodness sake, the first black actor. Yeah, but anyway, you got black actor.
Well, actually, they only had one top black actor of extraordinary level, and Sidney Poitier.
Sidney Poitier,
who did to Sir with Love and so on. That was setting the standard. But
was he inspirational back in the day when you?
Oh my goodness! Give me a break. That's our brother of inspiration, because that was the first black brother, and of course he was well spoken, well appointed, and had a command in front of the screen. So he was setting him and people such as Harry Belafonte was our icons, idols of that moment.
But the thing is, with Superfly now, it goes totally against their. It's fogged out movie. So fogged out.
I mean, what you're talking about?
Fog and funk come together.
The percussion done by Henry, who was a staff percussionist at Curtin. And then you have Phil Upchurch, who worked with George Benson and so on, and on Breezing and so forth, as the main guitarist, one of Chicago's best rhythm guitarists, who worked with all the legendary studios at one time or the other.
But it's funny because I got a clip of Curtis is actually featuring in the movie as well, isn't it? In a scene where he's in there playing the track there. So you gotta think about it. This was almost like the fulcrum, and this is what I'm saying. We get so gassed about Black Panther. Oh, Black Panther, this all the black people come out to it. Look how much. And I was saying, look, it's proof that we have a market, and black people go out and watch movies and make it successful.
Well, there's nothing new. Yeah, that's what actually.
Superfly was there way before.
Okay, that's what happened.
50 years ago?
Yeah, Superfly was a template for what actually happened in the 90s with black movies. There was over
Boomerang.
30. That's right. There was about 30 black movies.
Yeah.
There was 30 black movies that did gold and above.
Jeez.
I repeat, gold and above. And many of them were belonging to black labels like La Face Records, Bad Boy Production, and Death Row Records. And Quincy Jones' label did soundtracks too, Quest Records. All of that during the 90s. But remember, the template was Shaft and Superfly. Woo.
Well,
and Shaft and Superfly came out of black-owned labels. Stax, Shaft, the year before. Superfly, 72. And then right around that time, right around that period, you had What's Going On, another landmark album by the late Marvin Gaye. So you were having sonic masterpiece coming out at that time from different black labels.
And they were challenging. They were challenging with the lyrical content.
Yes.
Now, as much as I haven't watched Superfly myself because obviously it's totally off my radar. I wasn't even on the radar. But I looked at the trailer and looked at some documentary stuff background. I might have to go and watch it myself. But what I found is that they were really trying to get across the story of the time. You know what I'm saying? They really felt like, okay, we're gonna get a bit more gruesome about it. We're gonna talk it real. You know what I'm saying? But the reality show is that they were saying that at the time, pimps were running the roads, and drug dealers were running the place. But the thing is, they didn't want to do it, but they had to do it. You know what I mean? They got addicted to it, and they kept it going. The lifestyle, this and that. So there's nothing new under the sun. But it's like the thing is, it was a blatant. It didn't hide away from the facts of life. You know what I mean? The music didn't, and whatsoever. And when for me, it sets a foundation that was based from Martin Luther King making his stand. Then these guys are 10 years later, they're kind of making their stand through their creativity and going, you know what, we're not messing about, and they did it because then cameras they used weren't cheap.
Well, okay, let's put it this way. Chicago was an important music city that has some of the best session musicians. And this is another interesting thing you should know, Roger, is that you'll find it as we go into Chicago Soul when we get a chance, that several of the people who actually work on Superfly, they were lecturers at university, and one of them is still alive actually.
Wow.
Who lectured John Pate, who did the orchestration and arrangement for Superfly. That's a serious black brother. He's in his late 80s now, but he's an academician as well. So these brothers were understand composition and arrangement.
Yeah, they weren't just turning up and playing by ear.
Chicago musicians during then, there were a lot of them went to the junior college, which many of them were taught by the late James Max. This is another brother. James. He get rub off from him, because James Max was the guy who was responsible for actually getting some of these the Tom Washington 84 to become savvy and understand lyrical content and musical structure and arrangement. So what actually happened, Chicago was the one of the key areas where some of the best black musicians congregated.
Wow.
And so,
Wow.
and many of them eventually moved to the West Coast. One of them was responsible, who worked in Chicago as a copyist and a session musician, was the one who impacted Michael Jackson with "Stop Till You Get Enough." That was a brother who worked at the major labels for Curtis Mayfield and Chess and so forth before he migrated to the West Coast.
Crazy.
So and also another thing too, during that time, Soul Train started in Chicago before it went to West Coast. The founder of Soul Train was a Chicago radio personality.
Wow.
So Chicago is very key in terms of sound. And Quincy Jones made his first successful time crossing over to pop #1 with "It's My Party," was produced in Chicago for Leslie Gore during the 60s. So there's a lot of history there with Chicago.
Chicago town, man.
Yes,
Crazy.
and yes.
And the thing is,
That's right.
But you know, again, you guys, we point out the synergy between these two creativities and the video and whatever. And yes, we're talking about black music, but Superfly was a important this, and that's what they call it, man. It was a black exploitation.
One of the best in the world, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? And that's the phrase. You know what I mean? The best phrase.
It was sort of a ghettoism, really, in a sense.
Yeah.
It was a title that was given to it, and the sad thing about it, Curtis was such a major crossover that a lot of the white promoters didn't want to promote it because it said it was too black. It's politics. Because he was at the time the album was so big that Curtis could perform anywhere and filled the arenas. He was that big. But this is the interesting thing about it. With that album, Chicago album, there was another Chicago album that was out that was #1 for 5 weeks as well during that year. Lonely Man by the Shy Lights. That came out to Chicago too, right around the same time. And guess who was featured as the sound engineer? Bruce Swedien, the same guy who worked on Off the Wall and Thriller. So Chicago had some of the best studio in the country, like Universal Studio.
And the thing is, it shows that if we have structures, we can do things internally.
Well,
guys.
the city, remember, Chicago was an entertainment center. It had some of the best engineers. It had the best string section from the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. These were the top. It's like the London Symphony Orchestra. These are the top guys available to be hired.
So the guys at Superfly knew they can go to Curtis and he'll get the job done.
Yeah, Mr. Salver Brov, who was the classical contractor, who's connected to the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. He could get the men necessary to underwrite the score, the sound for Superfly. That's why when you hear the strings on it, it was the best. The strings were the best of Chicago. Yeah, you couldn't get any better. When you hear the strings, they were, there was almost choral. It was totally different. It was different.
Yeah, it's definitely 100%, guys. Different, and I think the reason why, like I said, guys, we gotta run off in a second. But listen, one thing I do know is that basically there is Superfly the Superfly, the album and the movie was part of a creative voice, a stand-up voice for black people against the oppression, against the madness that we was facing, and gave an insight of what was going on, and it became $1 million. Millions of dollars were
actually it according to the last statistic, it generated $20 billion in gross earning.
20 billion or 20 million?
20 million, sorry.
Yeah. 20 billion, I'm like, yo.
That could, sorry, I would get excited.
Yeah.
How much is 20 million during that time if we were to quantify and make it today? That, with inflation, that is hundreds of million today. And also the album became a Grammy Hall of Fame. It was inducted in the Grammy Hall of Fame. Wow. Superfly,
independent album, inspiration.
It became a benchmark, and out of it, Curtis Mayfield was contracted to do Claudine, a soundtrack, which was a gold album for the Gladys Knights and the Pip produced. And the studio that he actually used was his own studio that he bought off RCA Records, and used the former sound engineer for the studio to work for him full time. That's why the sound was so rich.
Perfect, because he needed space.
He needed the best.
Yeah.
So and we can celebrate Superfly now. Superfly is almost, it's 50 years old.
50 years old.
As of July, it is 50 years old.
Crazy.
And when we were listening today, it was fresh as ever.
Fresh. I'll be like,
I just funk. Look, System Brothers, I recommend you revisit Superfly because it's total mastery. It's sonic excellence at its best.
Yeah, man, this is how we do it. And this is all about a project which Curtis Mayfield brought his creative genius to actually be the icing on the cake, amazing cake, but he became the crucial part of my birthday cake is going to be the icing. Everyone moans at me about that, but it's going to be the icing. That reminds me, I have to get the exercise bike to burn it off. The burner for exercising anyway, so But listen, this is Rajan Infinity Extra alongside Kevin Tomlin, and get ready for the second part of Curtis Mayfield, where we're going to go more into his musical expression and albums, creativity, what he's done.
Yes.
And moving on up, people, moving on up.
Yes.
Hey, this is your bishop from Rock Solid. Thank you so much for watching us on YouTube. Thank you so much for clicking and subscribing, and also sending these videos to other people as well. We are so hungry to get your support. So remember, check us out on our website, and also check us out on Insta, and wherever you want to find us on Spotify. You can play us all day as well. And just make sure that you are supporting this channel, that we are developing our agenda towards music of black origin, and that is gospel music with a message. So please walk with us on this journey. Bye now.